So
We've talked about that before.
Okay, I think we're live. And
Almost.
And that's Josh as well.
Done.
All right, we're live. Welcome everyone to the Weekly Roundup. So it seems like the theme for today is a little bit stuff, all things stuff. Mine is something that's like also kind of related to stuff, how you train your stuff and what your routines are. Mine is something we talked about many times before, which is sort of fast visit flow, fast visit experience. I'm new in town since moving back to Sweden, and I've been trying out different places, different studios, and I am shocked and dismayed at how terrible they are in their marketing, and just why don't they try and sell to me? I'm so frustrated with it. Sell me, I want to be sold to. So I had big hopes for this Pilates studio that I was going to try next, because at least they had some ads. I was like, wow, they have Facebook ads. They know that I'm looking for classes. They know I'm the right age group and I'm in town. Like I live 5 blocks away. There's some ads and they're being thrown at me. So I have big hopes for this place. So I got there and their intro is like 3 classes for free. Each time I identified myself as being new to the studio, new to this, new to Pilates, whatever. Not a single time did I get any kind of questions as to how was your class. The second class, I even tried to kind of strike up a conversation with the teacher when we were all waiting outside to go into the class. And these are like real Pilates, so it's like a small group of 10 people. I tried to strike up a conversation about like, oh, I did you guys used to be in a different space? Because someone said you used to be downtown before. She was too busy to answer my question because she was doing something on her phone. So one of the other students answered me and told me, yeah, we used to be next to the booth shop. So yeah, and then the third class I did, not a single email either. I've given everyone my email. I've given everyone my phone number. I just want emails from them. I want to see what their funnels are. Nothing. No one's sending me anything. The last class, I told this teacher after class, that was my third one. Do you have like any offers or anything for like new people? And then she kind of goes, she's like a little bit offended with me asking. She's like, we gave you 3 classes for free. That's our offer to you. And then we have like, now if you want to continue, we have this. She started rattling off this menu and they have like many different options. It's like 12 different ones. Rattled off the menu of 12 different options. So I know that, you know, it's still, even this day and age, still people are a little bit like, oh, I don't know if I want to sell. I don't want to be so salesy. Like yoga teachers are a little bit like, oh, we don't want to do a sales training because we don't want to be those sales people. Like people want to be sold to. I mean, maybe I'm a little bit extreme being a yoga business coach, but you know, I was honestly thinking that I like the classes at this studio, and I think I wanted to buy like a 10-pack or something. And if they sold that to me, I would have bought it on the spot. I probably will still buy it, but now I'm dithering. I'm like, yeah, you know, I'm going to buy it, but then suddenly I booked a trip that I wasn't like expecting. So hey, maybe I won't buy it until after my trip. Suddenly, you know, 4 weeks have passed and I haven't bought anything. So yes, people want to be sold to. They want to be told what to do. Lots of people are like wavering on the edge. They kind of want it, but they don't know if they really, you know, am I going to do it now or later? So yes, get your people to sell to them, get them to speak to people. So important. Just, yeah, I get upset when it doesn't happen. So that's it, my little rant. Alex, Josh, you all have opinions.
Yeah, I think that's a great sharing your experience with this other studio and Pilates studio in specific. I think it speaks volumes to the fact that it's a good thing to remind yourself as a studio owner that no matter what tech stack you have in place, it can never completely replace authentic connection. And so in this case, the studio was not doing funnels and wasn't having, marketing, et cetera. But at the same time, like, it's so important to be able to check yourself at the door as far as like yourself as the leader, the owner, the manager, your staff, and it's soft skills. These are just human connection soft skills that are really essential. And for a teacher not to recognize a newer student in there who's essentially available with listening ears, ready to tip and buy and purchase and be shown the journey, right? It's not even just you want to be sold to, you just really want to be shown how to, right? And in an authentic way. And I think that's super important. We were talking about staffing and we'll probably get there, but when it comes to the outward clientele, right? Authentic connection, first impression, totally engaged, teaching those skills, just like you teach sales, first visit flow and sales skills at the front desk. You also have to teach your staff how to just connect, like find ways into your student base. It's a huge effect, as a ripple effect into your community moving forward. And then as we move towards staff, we're talking about like, if we have expectations of staff, right? We have to be clear with our words and our agreements, and we'll talk about that as we move forward. But I'm thinking both ways, like soft skills at the front desk, in and around your space, and clear, concise expectations, written boundaries with your staff, so everybody has success. Josh. Go ahead, Josh. I think you're mute.
Yeah. I think my internet will be strong enough. I have no power where I am right now. The thing that comes to mind for me with this is how much this example demonstrates the fact that there is a certain amount of business success, which comes down to just you have a half decent product that people want and your location is good. That's it. And in fact, there's a whole TED talk on this really deep study of business. And what it found was the most extreme predictors of business success were exactly that. It was like number one by far was location, and number two was time. Or maybe it was the other way around. It was like the timing of the business and the location had the highest impact. The problem with the study that they don't talk about is that there's no way in a quantitative way for them to differentiate between a business operationally that is very sound and one that's just like kind of not doing anything. So even if you're in a bad location at a bad time, but you do everything right, it's very possible that you would succeed. But the point would be this example that Vicky's story is like, yeah, it's so cringy basically, but it makes me think about when a yoga studio says to us, oh, we had this success in the past and then now we don't. Like in the good old days, we used to always be full and now we're not. That's an indicator of like that Pilates studio. Right now, they probably have enough people and they don't care about their processes or whatever. But what happens when a competitor opens up down the street? It's going to come and eat their lunch because they're creating a gap in the market that can be filled rather than building a moat around their business so that they don't have competition. Not sure if you guys got any of that, but
yeah, we did. That was good. I like the idea of building a moat around. And I was going to say, that's why I haven't found a yoga home here in Dayton, Ohio. I've just been so underwhelmed by the studios I attended. And there's this one studio everybody raves about, but they put up so many barriers on their website. Again, I think being business coach and studio owners gives us this whole different perspective. And they're intro specialists for locals only, and you have to show proof of residence on your first visit. So you buy a drop-in, and then they'll apply it to their intro offer. And I'm just offended by that. I'm just like, really? What? It's like I have to show you proof of residency. Now there was another studio that required that, but then when you show up at the front desk, say, "Oh yeah, it says it on the website, but we don't really do that." And I'm like, okay, well, if you're not going to do it, then why do you have it on the website? I just think it goes to like, to Josh's point or Alex's point, is that authentic connection. Well, make it authentic on your website as well. Make it so that we talk about it, low barriers to entry. And when you have people that are actively looking for your product or looking for your services, you think you want to do anything possible, which leads me to the strip mall at the end of my street is finally getting some activity. And there used to be an Anytime Fitness there, which would be a perfect studio location. So now I'm thinking, well, damn it, maybe I better open a hot yoga studio in Dayton so I could have a place to go do yoga. I mean, that's how frustrated I am. No, anyway, but yeah, it's just like people just saying hi to people is amazing that you get on that. So, and it kind of comes to back to what we were talking about, just Alex alluded to, is with staff and what's going on with your staff and having those clear expectations. And lately I've had conversations with some of my clients around particularly a little bit with teachers, but more so with support staff, be it mostly front desk, whatever you choose to call that position, whether it's front desk, whether it's a cleaning, even like a karma cleaning, whatever that is that they're telling you when they want to work and then you're left with, wait, I don't have support at the times that I need it. So coming back to defining what it is you need done, what is the thing that needs to be done? What is the job that needs to be done? And when do you need that job or those tasks to be done? And then you hire people for those times. It's not like, tell me when you can work and we'll fit it in. It's like, no, this is when I need support around these activities. And as Alex said, having that, it's spelled out, having the job description, having the expectations, having the agreements, all of that up front. And it's like, here's your package. This is what we're offering. This is the time. And if this doesn't work for you, then it doesn't work for you. But instead of, oh yeah, Terry, I'd like to work this day and this day. And is that okay? Oh, but next Tuesday I can't because I've got to do this. So I'll work Wednesday morning instead. And I see that a lot. And now that some of the owners are starting to take some control of that because they're recognizing, no, this is about when I need them, not when it's almost like, oh, well, I'm working for you for a favor. Well, no, I'm paying you. So who's in charge of this? Who's in charge of this? And I think it's time as owners, it's like, you need to be in charge of it, not the people that are doing the job. You're in charge of it. They work for you, not the other way around. Alex.
Yeah, I think, in the yoga world, in particular, dynamics between owners, teachers, and even staff, but let's say teachers, is kind of like this unusual group think ecosystem. And neither one serves each other. So really, when it comes down to is defining the responsibilities in the business that need to be done. Define when, how, what needs to be done. You can brainstorm it, build out the job description, whether it's teaching or front desk staff. And then you have to have a distinct, clear onboarding process in which you have interview processes, then you have second interviews, you bring the person in, you hire them to the job at hand, you put them on the schedule, and you set clear and concise expectations. And then, of course, if there is subbing, like with teachers or even front desk staff, you have a full process in place to support that and the flexibility that inherently comes with a brick and mortar in this type of business. But if you are a studio owner right now and you have manager, assistant manager, or you have teachers that are always coming and going, and they're sort of running the studio and you're reacting to it, the only reason you got there is because you never set clear boundaries. And so the key is and I've seen this happen before with owners. They may have come out of the corporate world and they know that you do not do this, right? You hire to the job at hand, you talk about compensation, non-competes, etc. It's all in play. They open a yoga studio and all of it goes out the door. So you really don't have, it's a very unusual scenario and we see it a lot. But you as the owner have the ability to make some simple, clear expectations in writing, hire the best people for those roles, and then create systems that allow for a certain amount of flexibility. And then everybody has success. Most importantly, your students, your community sees and feels that sense of professionalism, even though you present it in somewhat of a casual manner. Like you can use casual terminology, but be backed up by like actual documents. Josh. Go ahead.
Yeah, I love everything you're saying. I totally agree, Alex. I actually just watched this whole training on how to build a co-op because I've been researching DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations. And then co-ops are like the real world model that exists that would be closest to that. And the most successful co-ops in the world exist in Canada and in Portugal. And the biggest one in the world in Portugal is very fascinating. But
Josh, you're really breaking up.
About it
You're breaking up.
Is that despite the fact that it has a voice and can vote and everything else.
We got to Portugal and then you went.
It sounded fascinating.
Yeah, I'm yeah. Alex is right. You guys keep going.
Well, I learned a new thing, a DAO, a disorganized autonomous organization. Is that what you said, Josh? A DAO? I like that. We're kind of a DAO. Aren't we kind of a DAO? The YC, we're a DAO. We're decentralized yeah, I like it. Josh is
so I was going to say, like, maybe some takeaways for people listening is, okay, do you have job descriptions written out? Do you have a formal, interview process in which you don't just pick anybody? A lot of times in the yoga studio, they're like, oh, she's great, I'll hire her. But really what you want to do is have everybody apply, interview them, job description for each role, right? Understand the compensation, and then you want employee contracts and teacher contracts, whether they're ICs or employees, in your state or your country. And then make sure you speak about thoroughly, have the compensation pay structure laid out and how and when you're going to be paid. And then, bye, Vicky. And then if you're going to, create a certain amount of subbing, because that's been talked a lot in the YC recently, what is your expectation around that? A lot of times studios are like, oh, everybody keeps subbing and I can't handle it, well, if you have a system in place and they break the system or the responsibilities, expectations, then you can steer it. But if you don't have something in place and it's just sort of like, I feel like Susan shouldn't be teaching all these classes and Frank keeps, leaving his classes or what have you. So those are the things that have in place. And I find so many studios don't even have that in place. So your thoughts, Terry?
Well, honestly, I think a lot of times, and I certainly was guilty of this, especially right after I took on ownership of my studio, is that fear of imposing a schedule for fear the teacher, particularly with the teachers, are going to say, well, I'm out. And then you're left having to cover, try to find people to teach a class. And it's never fun to run a business from a position of fear. And then B, I would highly suggest that you don't run a business from a position of fear, or at any position of fear, like whether you live your life from a position of fear or something like that. It can have so many negative consequences on yourself, both professionally, personally, on your psyche, creates a lot of stress. And so I think when you do, to Alex's point, have those defined structures. And I know some of you are out there, and I was this way too, because I know some people love like SOPs up the yin yang and everything documented and love checklists and this and that. And then there's those of us who are a little bit more freewheeling, who are the ones, and I always say this, classic, doing the book report the night before it's due, right? So if you fall more into that camp, keep in mind, even if it's just a basic outline, it doesn't have to be like a job description that for a Fortune 500 company. It needs to be something that works for you. And now there's this thing called Chat GPT, which would be interesting for someone to plug in job description for a yoga teacher. anybody has a ChatGPT account wants to check that out, maybe post it, that'd be interesting. But there are lots of tools and resources out there if you're unsure where to start. Like I went out to Indeed.com and typed in yoga studio manager or yoga teacher. And there were all kinds of job descriptions that popped up. And I took some of that. I, copy and pasted some of that stuff. Now, when it came to my employee agreement, I did not copy paste that. I had a lawyer do that for me. So again, disclaimer there, it's always a good idea to have a lawyer draft any legal document that's specific for your business, as opposed to copying and pasting off the internet. But I think for things like a job description or things like that, go out and look and see what's on like Indeed.com and get some ideas there. And you can keep it super duper simple. And then the other thing that with regards to, again, always wanting to always be hiring, like we say, you're always advertise, you're busy, you advertise when you're busy so you don't get slow, right? So you're always hiring, you're always searching for staff when you're fully staffed, so that when you need to hire someone, you have a bank of people that you can go back to. And I know several of our clients in the YC have this, is interested in joining our team. It's permanent, it's on their website. They have a page on their website about become part of the Yoga Tribe or the Nomad Business Coaching or Nomad Yoga Studio team, become part of our team, right? And have like a teacher job. What are we looking for in a teacher? What are we looking for maybe in support staff? And then with a simple thing, hey, are you interested? Let us know. Here's a contact form you fill out, so that then you're always getting people that are interested. You can do like pre-interviews and say, hey, thanks for applying. Thanks for reaching out. Right now, we're not actively hiring, but we really appreciate you responding. If something comes up, we'll let you know, right? So, and then the other thing that I have a client that does, again, at the footer of every email, is interested in joining our team. And then there's a link to the landing page on the website. So those are things you can continually do. As always just actively be looking for people. Like someone comes to your studio and starts, maybe they're really excited and they're like, hey, would you be interested in working our front desk? Maybe you notice something, right? Or you're out and about in the world. Like I've told people, I would, if I had a studio still, I'd hire you, right? If you come across someone out when you're out shopping or whatever, and you have a business card and say, hey, if you're ever interested, we're always looking for great people like you, give them your business card. Actually, I had that happen to me several times in the past, right? It's like, you'd be great with our team. If you're interested, boom, here's a card, contact us, right? So that's the other thing, is always be recruiting, always be trying to get people that might be interested in working for you. So that way, then you go from that position of fear to a position of power, because the fear is the scarcity. And if you always have a pool of candidates to draw from, then if needs be, then you can go out and hire. And the other thing too is, if something's not working and you're trying to put a Band-Aid on it, it might be better just to rip the Band-Aid off, let it bleed for a while until you find the right person. Because again, speaking from experience, there's nothing worse for your business than keeping someone in a position when you know they shouldn't be there because you don't feel you don't have somebody to do the job. It'd be better to get them out, cobble something together quickly, and then let that happen. Carol, I see you nodding your head up and down. Had your hand went up. Well, it sounds like you have some experience with it.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I love everything everyone's been saying. What's coming to mind for me is, yes, having to do it yourself while you find the right person is way better than having that, somebody that's, we just like, you got to cut the cancer out. Like, you have to get it out because it's not going to be effective for you and your business. And also what's coming to mind for me is like, I love what you were saying, Alex, about people, like they can be corporate, they can be like, know all these things. And you put yoga in front of your business and all of a sudden they just like lose it. And I think it's just super important to remember that you own a yoga business. So all these things, you have to be business minded and in all these things. And, coming down to hiring, which is, big thing we were talking about here. When we hired for our desk staff positions, it was always like, these are your hours. So we set that was like the main expectation, like these are when we need you. So it's coming back to what Terry was saying. And if you can't work those hours, you're not going to get a shift, that's what it is. And then blowing it out more into like, because early on that desk shift was just like checking people in, you can read a book, but then as we got better equipped and understood what we needed in that role, to your points, it's like build out exactly what you need in those areas. And then it takes me back to be specific as far as like even that we called it uptime. Whenever the students were entering and exiting the studio, your phones are not in your hand. Like Vicky's experience having somebody like too busy to answer a student's question because you're on your phone, like if that's happening in your studio, one, we got to know about it and we need to fix it, but setting the expectation of just putting your phone down, just standing. We talk about matching and mirroring to create that rapport with people, those soft skills that Alex is talking about. Like you need to sometimes tell your staff these things down to that level. Like, no, you stand during the check-in, you greet people, say their name, use names, and your phone is down. And that alone sometimes is, one, creates that connection, and two, sets the expectation from the owner that this is what we need to do. Because people sometimes don't have those soft skills. So we need to teach them. Terry?
Totally. I mean, absolutely agree. I was thinking when you said about, Disneyland and Disney World, they have this, it's called being on set, right? And then when they're on set, which means they're out in the park, and that goes for whether the characters that are dressed up like Mickey Mouse and, whoever, with even the, the ears and stuff on, to the park employees, whoever, you're on set, which means you're in the Magic Kingdom, which means you have a smiling, happy face, which means you're there, you're present, you're engaged. I would love to know what Disney's policy is on personal mobile devices these days. That would be interesting to know. And then when they go to on break, they're offset. And so even within Disney, I know this because I had a friend who used to work for Disney, would be like, if they're two employees, like, are you on or off set? Oh, I'm on set. Okay, boom, I won't talk to you. Right. So they're very much into that culture. So the same thing I used to talk to my staff about, and I know we've said this in the YC before, it's like people come to do yoga to get rid of their problems. They don't come to yoga to hear about our problems. And I know that it's a very fine line sometimes, because it's sort of an intimate experience we have with our students. And they do share a lot. I don't know about you guys, but sometimes I'm like, TMI, TMI, TMI. It's like, I feel sometimes like I was their therapist, because they would tell me stuff. And I think it's just sort of that it opens them up and they feel comfortable, which I guess is great. It shows that they feel safe talking about this stuff. However, that's not something we should be reciprocating. Right. And I mean, maybe there are those who will disagree, but I feel that we shouldn't be reciprocating and telling them how we're feeling about stuff. Right. Now, obviously, there are times when it's like when my mother passed away and I came back from California, people in my studio knew that my mother had passed away. So they, yes, I was sad. And they understood that, and I would accept their condolences, but still I had to maintain a little bit of that on set because I was still so emotionally raw. However, I acknowledged their support, but I didn't let it become such of a thing that I'm just in the studio crying every day. That would have gotten, I think, old really, really fast. So to Carol's point, you have to teach those skills. And I just said, leave your problems in the parking lot, leave them in your car. And if you're really having a bad day, leave them in your car. You got to be on present when you come into the studio. Absolutely. I one time sent an employee home. I sent her home because she had a complete breakdown. She's sobbing in the lobby 10 minutes before we were supposed to open. And she's like, oh no, I can teach. I said, no, you're not. You're not teaching today. I actually had to go out the back door because I had a back door. I said, I want you to go out the back door. I want you to go home and I will check on you after class. All right. And she was like, okay. Because it's like, there's no way I was going to let her teach because she was just an emotional wreck. Right. So yeah, you got to set those boundaries, have all that drafted out, let people know what the deal is. Alex.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to staffing, particularly desk or what have you, I mean, teachers are sort of their own entity in itself. But when it comes to staff, is yes, you can teach it, but you really need to hire to it. So hire to the soft skills and set the expectation high and don't compromise as a studio owner. And because every compromise you make, you will look back over time and say, geez, I knew that wasn't a good hire. You know, I knew that was going to create more trouble for me, but I thought maybe I could like get them to do X in a different way. But follow your intuition when it comes to soft skills, hire to it, set those expectations, maybe use some of your core values from your business or what have you, make sure this person naturally aligns with that. And, you know, the more you can define the role, the more easily you will find the ideal candidate.
I love that. Define the expectations. And it goes to the adage, hire slow, fire fast. Right. And I think back to your point, and I mean, we're drilling this in. I know we just keep saying it. It's like, what are the expectations? What are the expectations? What's the schedule? And hire for that. And I mean, I even had it in my policies that cell phones were to be put away. Right. They could not be on the front desk. The only exception to that was, well, no, it wasn't even an exception. It was like for like the hot Pilates teachers that use music in their phone, is like their phone had to be not on the front desk, but there was a place they could put it and then they could grab it before they went into the hot room. Right. So now the difference there is I do know some studios will let the teachers check in clients on their phone, right? Like through, like with MindBody through the check-in app, or with Walla with the check-in app. So that can be a little bit dicey because then you're not, it's like they've got their phone and they're on their phone. So I might even argue in that case, if that's going to be, I would just get an iPad, or I would just get a tablet of some type. And that's, rather than them checking in on their phone, invest in an iPad. And that's what they use to check people in. So there's a clear delineation between, I'm not on my phone, I'm on this iPad for check-in. And there's no temptation to start scrolling through Instagram or whatever, or, you know, working their their playlists ideally should be done before they get to the studio, right? They shouldn't be trying to create a playlist right before class starts. So I would just suggest, perhaps if that's you, invest in the iPad and just say, hey, from now on, we're checking in on the iPad, not the phone. Alex.
Yeah, I mean, I think what comes up to something to remember as we suggest setting these clear expectations and boundaries. One of the things as an owner that you have to really sometimes step back and look at is, are my expectations of my students and my staff aligned with reality? In other words, this is a big one. So if we set expectations that are not aligned with reality and boundaries that are not aligned with reality, what happens is every day as an owner, you feel really alone and you're trying to force these boundaries into your community, whether it's student-based or staff-based. So using technology, like you suggested, the iPad or what have you, using technology and systems of checks and balances and SOPs, et cetera, to basically manage the natural inherent fluidity and flexibility of running a brick and mortar business to maintain the overall path towards goals is critical. So something we talked about before we got on the call is utilizing like a teacher scheduler situation for teachers to be able to sub. So you create a process, an SOP around what is allowed for subbing, and then you provide a system in which it works to support the reality of teachers' lives. They may be teaching in 3.5 studios each. They might be teaching once a month, all over the place. So you create a system and you give them technology so that it helps support reality. And I think that makes a lot easier for an owner, so that they're not always trying to force something down that's not aligned with reality.
Totally. And then the other thing is hashtag Terry's dad. We haven't had a hashtag Terry's dad in a while. is don't ask somebody to do something that you wouldn't do yourself. Right? It's like, if you're not willing to do a job in your studio, then you shouldn't ask an employee. And if that's something, maybe you hire someone specifically for that particular job. Right. So that's the other thing to think about as well. And I always laugh. The first day I took ownership of my studio, one of the first things I did was the shower drain was backed up. And so I had to go in and just the massive amounts of hair, right? It's just like, I'm pulling out just all this massive amount. And I just sat there, and all of a sudden I just burst into laughter, and I started laughing so hard. And I just looked up. I went, yeah, Dad, this is what I'm doing on my first day of business ownership. It was just so ironic that here I was, woo, big business owner, and I'm unclogging the hair trap. So yeah, always be humble, be willing to do those things that, maybe you don't want to do. But yeah, just that's my only other take on that. And if there's a job that's really crappy you don't want to do, hire someone specifically for that job. Yeah. Carol, how did you handle subs at your studio? What was your sub policy?
When this came up, I was interested to find out what you guys did, because I've seen some conversations in the YC about like putting parameters on how many times a month you can sub and that kind of thing. We utilized a private Facebook group we have one just for teachers of the yoga, and we have one for IHP teachers. And you would put in a sub request basically in your private group to your fellow teachers and get it covered that way. And we never put parameters on how many times a month you could do that. I kind of felt like, look, it's a part-time gig. Part of the draw to this is that you can adjust your schedule as needed. Things come up, we get it. And as long as your class gets covered, I'm cool. So, I mean, if you needed to get 8 classes covered that month and you did it with trades or whatever, I was fine with it. But I know that there's some people that are they kind of want to keep the schedule as is, but I don't know. I was kind of interested to know how you guys handled it too, because like I said, as long as it got covered, I was happy about it.
So a couple of things that come up to mind is I used to call it the 80-20 rule. Basically, if you've hired the right staff and teachers, then essentially, even if you're teaching, 8 different styles of classes or what have you, you can manage the ability for anyone to sub for any teacher. That being said, you may have the 80-20 rule, meaning at least 80% of your teachers are on point and can lead the whole class and teach what you've hired them to. The other thing is hiring them to the specific classes. So we had, 10 different types of classes in 2 different rooms, etc. So you're hired for, bar classes, mat classes, and vinyasa classes, right? And that's the classes that you can pick up. One of the things that we utilized was called teacherscheduler.com. I posted something on the YC yesterday. And then I think my studio is now using, I think it's called When I Work. And basically they're great systems that you can build out parameters and limitations and boundaries into it. So if I hire John as a teacher to teach these classes, restorative, vinyasa, and bar classes, I can put him into the system, and so he can only be sub for those classes essentially. And you can also limit like how many subs that person could do in a given amount of time. So in other words, you set the expectation, then you put it into the system, you give them a way in which to find the sub. There's a whole text communication internally, and then the manager or whoever can quickly change it, or there's a process to change it in your CRM, your software. And so then you're not sort of hurting it. What I'm hearing a lot of studio owners saying, they look back at the month and like, wow, the newest teacher taught the most amount of classes and it's really impacting my community. That's where it becomes a problem, right? Where your product is changed quarterly because of the influence of the type of teachers you have in place. If you hire the right people, put the boundaries on it, provide the system, then they understand, and then tell them the why, right? The reason this is important to me in my studio and our community is because we really need the depth of knowledge to offer the product on a consistent manner so that the community isn't like so confused. The first quarter of the year was great. The second quarter of the year, like the same titled class totally was different because he or she's a newer teacher. So those things are real for sure. And so I would highly recommend people looking into this. That's also Studio Ease, I think, does something like this. Terry was
I was
saying.
going to say, Studio Ease is one that they're integrated with MindBody. So I use them back when it used to be called, some of you might have heard of it, SubSync. And I loved it because that automatically when and the same thing with Studio Ease or SubSync, you can set the parameters like Beacom, Beacom requests only go to Beacom. You set who can get what request notifications. And then once a teacher accepted the request, then it automatically updated the schedule in MindBody, which I love. So I think, Carol, to your point, I was fairly, I was sort of somewhat the same way. It's like, as long as you get the class covered. But again, in the very beginning, I only had Beacom. So it was much easier. So the other thing too, when it comes to sub requests, is if you have a variety of different classes, and to Alex's point, particularly with like a vinyasa class, where a power vinyasa class and you've got more experienced teacher that's able to do different things, it can change when you have a very inexperienced teacher teaching. And so that definitely, and if you have a bigger studio with more teachers, it just becomes a bigger thing to manage. So there is some economies of scale there. If it's a single location, not a huge schedule, limited classes, I think it's a little easier to manage it, Carol, the way you and I did. However, I do think that however you manage it, same thing. Let's go back to what are the policies? What are the guidelines? What are the restrictions? What's the process to have that system so that you as the owner are not continually worried about, is this class covered or not? And, one thing that I kind of landed on with several of my clients is looking at it, because sometimes you have one teacher that's subbing constantly, but then we'll never pick up subs from anybody else. Sometimes there's that. So maybe that person's not a good fit, but coming up with on a quarterly basis, the agreement is you're going to teach at least 80% of your classes on a quarterly basis, something like that, where that going in that, and to your point, Carol, yes, for a lot of people, this is they do have another full-time job or something else. However, you still need, it's still, like you said, it's a business you run, so you do need to have reliability. So again, setting up those guardrails. So I know if I'm hired, even if, I'm teaching or have a full-time job, whatever it is, okay, these are the expectations that I'm committing to teaching these classes. And on a quarterly basis, this is how many I can request sub from. And of course, this is barring a major emergency, like you end up in the hospital or you have a death in the family or something like that. This is just, I want to go to Florida this weekend. And the other thing too, is I did have a policy because that was getting a little bit ridiculous, is sub requests had to meet there. Once we got to a certain one, I think it was 2 weeks, you couldn't sub out unless it was an absolute emergency. So to that point, it's Wednesday, I want to go to Florida this weekend. No, sorry. You should, that was the one thing I had as well, is that once the schedule was set, you couldn't change it within a 2-week time period. So again, whatever the policy is, just make sure everybody knows about it.
Yeah, and if you're able to put those limitations into this teacher schedulers, Studio Ease, I work, when I work, what have you. The key is you hire to it, you set the expectations, then you put the boundaries in the tech.
Yeah.
and essentially that stops it. So people don't, it's not a people person thing anymore. They don't always come to the owner and the owner says no, and okay, I'll let you do it. It's just all set it and forget it, so to speak. I mean, and I think that really helps the engine run smoother over time. And even, Terry, like the 2-week thing, for instance, some studio may not have that policy, right? They may just let it go up until the last minute. But if the technology is set up to protect the expectation and the policy in the business, then you're all set. The software will protect it. Yeah.
And all boils down to, what's the policy? Is it set up? What's the expectation? Does everybody know it? I mean, that's pretty much basically it. It's like, everybody's has that. So it's not wishy-washy. It's not one person thinks it's this and one person thinks it's that. It's all transparent, it's all equitable, and everybody knows what the deal is. I think that's what it boils down to.
Yeah, and you know what comes to mind is the reality of how this conversation may be hitting a lot of the listeners on their ears, is that we're talking about like an ideal scenario, right? But they're in the middle of some sort of experience, right?
Right.
Like first quarter felt pretty good. Second quarter is like a little crazy. Oh my God, what's going to happen this summer? So in other words, they might be wondering, how do we integrate these suggestions into our reality on the ground?
Good point.
And so this comes down to like level set conversations, telling people the what, why, when, explaining the vulnerability of yourself as a leader, meaning these are the things I've done in the past that have left me empty and it didn't work, or I was reactive and not being able to be a leader, and really getting visceral with the actual past story, and then bringing them up to speed to the present moment, and then implementing a new path forward. And so that can be a conversation with your coach, if you have a coach, or you want to get a free coaching call with one of us or what have you, to kind of start saying, okay, how am I going to get to where I need to be from where I am now? Because I think that's really what's probably happening for a lot of listeners right now.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's where do I start? If you don't have anything in place and it's a bit overwhelming, where do I start? And to Alex's point, if with our coaching clients, we can help you with that. And if you don't have a coach, book a free call with any of us and we can specifically dive into that. And in terms of, it's not really part of what we're going to talk about today, but I'm just going to put it out there because, we're talking about staff, we're talking about subbing, we're talking about teachers, which always leads into, what are you going to pay them or what are you going to pay your staff? So we have an upcoming webinar on, in the YC Weekly yesterday, it was a little bit of a misprint. The webinar for the next webinar is Tuesday, May 30th at 12 noon Central. And Alex is going to be talking about pay structure and how can you figure out if you can afford to give someone an increase. And so if that, which is always a timely topic. So if you can join us live on the 30th, again, 12 noon. And if not, if you have a premium membership, you can watch the recording. If you don't have a premium membership, well, let us know. We'll get you signed up for that, right? So you can get access to all those recordings. So that's a really good one that is coming up here in the next couple of weeks. So I'm really excited about that workshop, about that webinar. So, well, we're pretty much at time. Anybody have any final closing thoughts before we wrap it up for this week of the this version of the Weekly Roundup? Okay, good. Well, thank you all. If you're joining, if you have any thoughts, comments, what's your sub policy, anything about anything we talked about today, any questions, please post it in the comments below. I think our summary of today is define the process and get the expectations. So interested to see how people are handling their subs. Are you using any type of tech for your sub? How does that work for you? What is your policy for subs? What is your policy for how do you manage hiring people? Anything like that, post it below. Let us know and ask questions, post anything. We're here to help and share. If you have a great idea, let us know. We'd love to hear about it. Otherwise, have a beautiful weekend. Shameless plug, the next time you see me next week, I will be a year older because my birthday is next week. Yeah. But I got called for jury duty. I know. Part of me is like, ugh, but then part of me is, I one time years ago got on a jury, and it really is a fascinating process. It really is a fascinating process. So we'll find out tonight if I get called up or not. But anyway, have a beautiful weekend. Go do some yoga. Enjoy life, right? That's what we're about. Enjoy life. All right, Keem. Thanks so much, Alex and Carol.